Resourceful, adaptable and creative is the subject for today. I have got 6 characteristics on things that resourceful people do. I have got 10 characteristics and actions that you can take to be more adaptable, and I've also got 10 things that you can do to be more creative as well. So it's quite a lot of content in today, so hopefully you kind of keep up for it. It is being recorded, so we will get this onto the YouTube channel. There was another 25 videos uploaded last week to the video channel, so there's over 300 videos on that now, and those playlists over everything that we've done. And I will get this one uploaded. We have got one from last week that hasn't been uploaded yet. There was a difficulty in the transfer with the editing, but I'm going to resend it with this one this week, so we'll get a double whammy going on there next week. Okay, guys, for this. Good stuff. Okay, so we'll get straight into it then. We're going to look at resourceful, being adaptable, being creative. And what I didn't want to do for this session was talk around some hairy-fairy stuff. I wanted to give you some key things that resourceful, adaptable and creative people do to make them either resourceful or adaptable or creative with it. So basically, I've got 6 things around resourceful, like I've said, 10 around adaptable and another 10 around creative as well. Let's just make sure I am spotlighted, guys. There we go. Right, okay, spotlight you. Okay, you should have me widescreen if you didn't have me widescreen, otherwise somebody's camera just flashed in, so I just want to make sure that you've all got me widescreen. Okay, so let's get stuck straight into it then. Resourcefulness. Let's have a look at resourcefulness. So 6 characteristics of resourceful people we've got for you here. The first one being resourceful people have an open mind, okay? Positively working at breaking boundaries and open to other views and ideas, okay? Now, we'd all like to think we've got an open mind, but as you guys know, if you've watched any of my sessions in the past, that when we grow up, we are conditioned a certain way, okay? So we sense it, we're using one of our senses, sight, feel, see, smell, whatever it may be. We sense it and then we store it, okay, into our filing cabinets, right? And all of that storage, everything, even right now as you're taking this in, it goes into your storage, gets stored, okay? Now the theory states that we store everything. Everything we ever feel, hear, see, say, smell, whatever, okay? We store it. It's just our recall of it that's the problem, okay? But that's for another session, another day. The point is, we store it all. And then, when we come up against something new in life, our brain tries to put a frame of reference around it by going back into our storage, okay? A little bit like when we first went into COVID, a lot of the news outlets were trying to put a frame of reference and compare it to like SARS or Spanish flu, something like that, okay? And that was their way of going, we've got this new thing, how do we put a frame of reference around it? What can we go to and put a frame of reference around it? It's exactly the same in the brain. When you look at something, people have a frame of reference around it. I had a conversation the other day with somebody. We were talking about the favourite cars and things, and I said mine's a 1967 Dodge Charger, okay? And the person I was talking to had completely no frame of reference for that car whatsoever. She just didn't know what it looked like, she didn't know what it was, she didn't know, by the way, if anybody wants to know, it was the Dukes of Hazzard car, okay, the General Lee, yeah? Not that I'd want one in orange with the national flag on it, with the Confederate flag on it, but nevertheless, Dodge Charger, 1967. But no frame of reference around it, okay? You might be thinking, what's this got to do with having an open mind? Well, if we've got all of this storage in our heads, when we see something new, the first thing we do is go into our filing cabinet and try and put a frame of reference around it, which then makes it quite difficult to be open-minded, or should I say challenging is a better word than difficult, isn't it? Yeah. It makes it quite challenging then to have an open mind. So, you know, loads of people go, oh yeah, you know, I've got an open mind. None of us really have an open mind because we've got a frame of reference in our head for what we've learned over the years, and that's kind of what we put on things with that. So we do have to really work on this one. We have to really work on, let's see what other people say. My view might not always be the right view, albeit you might feel that way because you've got some stuff in your filing cabinet in the past about it, yeah? I don't know if anybody has seen these little clips that sometimes people put on YouTube and Facebook on the internet, but I can't remember the name of the psychological concept actually, it'll come back to me. It's where you watch a movie and you think you've heard something and people latch onto it and it becomes a catchphrase, but actually it wasn't said in that way. And that's because we attach a frame of reference to it in our head. So for instance, the most famous one was E.T., the movie E.T. We all know the famous line in E.T., phone home. Yeah, when he's pointing up, phone home. He actually said home phone in the movie. But somebody took that into their brain as phone home rather than home phone, which is what it was in the film, made a phrase out of it, and then it started to go viral. Well, in those days, obviously, whatever viral was in those days. And now if you say to people, what's the famous line in E.T.? Phone home. E.T. phone home. It wasn't. It was E.T. home phone. It was the other way around. And so that's a great example of where sometimes if somebody had that argument with you, if somebody said to you home phone and not explained it like the way I just had, you'd go, well, no, he didn't say that, he said phone home. So you would assume your view is right based on something that's not factual. So that's why it's very, very useful to have an open mind and take in other people's views and ideas. The way that I like to do this is I like to view that my views are just one view and other people have lots of other views. Is there ever going to be a right or a wrong? You don't really know because a lot of it's opinion, isn't it? So, you know, we drive on the left-hand side of the road, other people drive on the right-hand side of the road, and so on and so on. Which one's right and which one's wrong? Neither. They're just different, for instance, okay? So, number one, open mind. And that one comes in to the other two subjects, adaptable and resourceful and creative as well. So that's why I've just spent a little bit of time on that. Okay, quite interesting to just make a bit of time for that. Open your mind for trying to get over boundaries and open your mind for other people's ideas and views. Remember, because your view is based on your frame of reference. Okay. They learn. So, resourceful people regularly take in new knowledge. Dare I say, all of the regulars that we've got on the session today and some of the newer people that I don't recognise as well, taking in knowledge. The only thing to be more resourceful is to have more resources in your head. So learn more, read more, listen more, watch more, whatever it may be. Okay. They're imaginative. Now, of course, this one's definitely going to come in with the creative piece as well. But they're imaginative. So learn to be creative and always ask questions. To be honest, this one and this one go hand in hand. Imagination and learning go hand in hand. So the creative and asking questions, well, if you've got to, in order to get knowledge, you've got to ask a question. Okay, so even if you're sitting, you know, on this session right now, when you logged onto it, what you really did in your brain was go, what's today's session all going to be about? What am I going to learn? Even though you don't physically ask the question is posed by the brain, otherwise you wouldn't be sitting here today doing that. Okay. Okay, so next three, resourceful people are resilient. Now, don't want to go too much into this because we did 3 whole sessions on resilience, being more resilient. We did part 1, part 2 and part 3 over the last few weeks, and they're on the YouTube channel, so you can go and check them out. But people that are resourceful are resilient. ability to compartmentalize those things that throw us off balance. So this is another good point here. There are several areas of your life, and if you joined us on last week's sessions, we did something called the wellness wheel, where people kind of graded themselves on the wellness wheel of 8 different areas of your life. And the point of doing that was, if you've got a bit of a below a 5, or a lower number in one of those areas on a scale of 1 to 10, then you can put some actions in place to start to change that, of course, can't you? But people that are resilient are able to compartmentalize some things that throw them off balance. So we all know sometimes when things go wrong, it's very easy to say everything's gone wrong at that point. One thing's gone wrong, everything's gone wrong, okay? Resourceful people are able to box things off. Okay, so that's not right. So that thing there in my life, in my work, is not right. Okay, I'm working on it or can't do anything with it right now. I'm going to box that off because I've got all of these other 7 other areas in my life where things are actually going okay. So that's quite a good little skill to have. I used to have a colleague, just bear with me a second, guys. There we go. I used to have a colleague that would visualize kind of putting a piece of paper in her brain, and kind of whatever was troubling her, she'd put a piece of paper into her head, and the thing would be behind it. Yeah, the thing that was a problem would be behind the paper, which would give the rest of her brain space to do stuff. Okay, it worked for her, but that's about compartmentalizing things in your head, so you're able to deal with better things in different ways. Honest. Resourceful people are honest. They are known for delivering and not over-promising. Okay? So they're honest with themselves around their time capacity, resource capacity. That's not to say that these people won't set themselves stretch goals. Absolutely. Of course, they'll set themselves stretch goals. But they're honest. They're straightforward. I need this amount of time. It's going to take me this amount of time to do this, and so on and so on and so on. And then finally, when it comes to resourcefulness, they also share knowledge. Now, this is one that sometimes isn't considered for resourceful people. When you think about somebody being resourceful, you think about all the stuff we've said so far, and resourceful people getting knowledge so they can be resourceful. However, really great resourceful people, they share their knowledge and expect others to share it also. So by sharing knowledge, you often get knowledge back. So actually, sometimes being resourceful could be helping somebody out. Could be sharing some of your knowledge with somebody, and then you learn something back on it. So again, that's one that isn't often thought about. Okay? So very quick recap before we move on to adaptable. Open mind. Okay? So we don't just go into our filing cabinet. They constantly learn and take in knowledge. They're imaginative and ask lots of questions. They're resilient and can compartmentalize things when they go wrong. They're honest and they do deliver but don't overpromise. And finally, they will share a lot of their knowledge and expect other people to share it back as well at the same time. Okay? So, hope you like that. Nice, quick, easy, 6 particular things that you can go and do if you want to be more resourceful. Okay? Good. Let's move on to adaptability. 10 signs of an adaptable, that should have said person on there. I've missed the person off. 10 signs of adaptability, or 10 signs of an adaptable person. Okay? Let's go into these and have a look at them. Okay? So, number 1, adaptable people are open to change and know how to manage the 5 stages of transition. Okay? So, change. We've covered change off a number of times on these courses, and people are yet again going through more changes at the moment. Hopefully now coming out of final lockdown, and then there's going to be a bigger change reintegrating people back into offices and organisations and all this type of stuff that's going on. So being adaptable is being open to change. Notice it doesn't say you're going to love change. Okay, because we know that people generally go through a bit of a negative drop. Even if that's a positive change, there's a bit of a negative drop. The negative drop in a positive change, by the way, is doubt. Doubt that it's actually going to happen. So there's a lot of people that would have felt quite good Monday evening. Yeah, Monday evening would have been quite good. You know, Boris is saying this, we're giving ourselves 5 weeks apart from doing these things. Actually, you know, I think this will be the end one. You know, legal stuff could be over by the 21st of June or July, whatever it was. Golf courses open on the 29th of March, which will be fantastic. And all this type of stuff, okay? So people go up in a high because of the change. And then the very next morning, the first news headline I get is Matt Hancock says that you know, these dates may not be kept to, or something along those lines, because if we don't do what we should, then it's going to be longer. And all of a sudden now, people are in a drop of doubt, especially based on what's in your filing cabinet for the last 12 months. Okay, so we'll go into doubt when hopefully, if we go to the timeline that's been suggested, we'll start coming back out of it. So even though this is perceptionally a good change, there's still going to be that drop into the rut. And of course, if it's a negative change, then you're going to get that drop into a rut. So it's not about being brilliant at change. It's not about embracing and loving every single change. It's just about being open to it. So you know that change is going to keep coming and coming and coming. And, you know, this last 12 months has been one of the best examples of that, hasn't it? Where change just keeps coming and coming and coming and coming. So adaptable people are open to change and know how to manage those 5 stages of transition. If there's any newer guys on the session today, if you haven't come across those 5 stages of transition, it's generally change, shock, denial, recognition, and acceptance. Okay, and if you go onto the YouTube channel, you'll undoubtedly be able to find some of the sessions that I do using the change curve, transition curve, sometimes the grief curve or the Kubler-Ross curve that you might have come across. Okay, so adaptable people experiment and they are open to change. Okay, and it's like my little experiment picture here. The reason it's the experiment is because you have to experiment when changes come up. Do I do this? Do we do that? Do we do what's the best thing to do? So they're open to change and they experiment. Okay. Number 2, they look at opportunities, not failure. Okay. So to adapt is to grow. To change, and to change you must forego what you once believed to be right, classify it as wrong, and then adopt what you now believe to be the new right. A little bit wordy, isn't it? That I apologise. There's lots of words in this particular session today, but I wanted to give you all these descriptions for it. So they look for opportunity and not failure, and what might have been right in the past might be wrong now, which means you need to do something that's right. Now, I've put a picture up here of the British Army. There is a really great advert on the radio at the moment. It might be on the TV as well, but it's on TalkSport quite a lot. And it's I have mentioned it before. It's a female officer that's coming to the end of a run and she's kind of out of breath. The caption says, "That's the sound of failure." And she says, "Yeah, today I failed by 40 seconds on my run. But yesterday, last week, I failed by 2 minutes on my run. So I failed by 40 seconds today. I know what I need to fail by tomorrow to be a winner by the end of the week." Okay? And I just think it's a fantastic advert because it really brings this home. Sometimes we have to fail to be great, don't we? Sometimes we have to fail to get it right next time. So adaptable people, they will look for opportunity and not see failures. If you do fail at something, that these types of people will look at that failure as, well, where's the opportunity in it? Where's the learning in it? What can I do better next time? Okay, so number 2, opportunity, not failure. Number 3, adaptable people think ahead. As you can see, my little picture didn't really do that, did they, on that picture? Always open to opportunity. Adaptable people are always on the lookout for improvement, minor tweaks that will turn ordinary into extraordinary, because they're not married to one size fits all, and they will also think ahead as well. So they try and look at different scenarios and all that type of thing. But notice here, okay, notice there's a big difference between somebody being adaptable and looking ahead and doing planned scenario thinking versus somebody who is just thinking of every possible what-if scenario that then worries them. So there's a big difference between the two. We all of us, no doubt, do some what-if scenarioing. So this has happened, what if that, what if this, what if that happens, what if this, and so on and so on and so on. There's a difference between letting your brain just run away, okay, and actually sitting down and doing some scenario thinking correctly with some structure behind it. There's a big difference, but adaptable people will do the scenario thinking that goes ahead, okay? Number 4, adaptable people don't whine, okay? If they can't change or influence the decision, you guessed it, they adapt and move on, okay? So we've talked about moaning before on these sessions that I've been doing, and whining. We do know that a very small moan can be quite cathartic, okay? So if you need to have a bit of a whinge or a bit of a whine, sometimes when we have a moan or we have a whinge, we feel a bit better afterwards, okay? We've all done that in the past. Got it off your chest and had a bit of a whinge, and then you can move on, okay? The issue is when the whine is too long or not in the right place at the right time with the right people, okay? So if it's a whine in business, if it's a moan in business, then you need to make sure you do that with a peer or a boss, never a subordinate, and it's always at the right time and at the right place with nobody else in earshot. And then you whine or moan for 5 minutes, you get it off your chest, and you then ask the question, so what are we going to do about it? For instance, so how do we adapt and move on from it, as it says here, okay? If you have a moan and don't then choose what to do with it, I'll guarantee you a week later you'll be moaning about the same thing. So taking action on that moan is quite important, and having that moan in the right place at the right time and for the right length of time. Now, it only takes about 300 seconds to release negative chemical out of your system, about 300 seconds, okay? That's 5 minutes, okay? So it shouldn't go on any longer than that, really. The only reason it will go on longer is if you've got lots of negative chemical in your system because you're annoyed or whatever it may be, okay? But adaptable people, they won't harp on that, they'll get it out and then they'll take some action on it. So if you want to call this adaptable people don't whine, they have a solution-focused, controlled whine, if you want to look at it that way. Controlled moaning to do something about it, okay? So that's quite a good one, number 4. They don't get stuck in the rut, it says there as well. So that rut of change, they don't get stuck in that rut. I've said this to you guys many times. If you've got people in your business that are still moaning about something that happened 10 years ago, then something changed 10 years ago they didn't like, they got stuck in a rut and they've never got out from it, okay? So they're quite rigid. They're not very adaptable, because otherwise they would have adapted and moved on by now, okay? And this year, in the last 12 months, people have been asked to be adaptable, and that's why it's caused a lot of imbalance, a lot of lack of gestalt is the term that you guys might have heard me say before, but a lack of imbalance, because people have been expected to be adaptable and then they're going to have to be adaptable again when we start to integrate people back into the working world, when COVID is finally under control, and so on and so on. Kids go back to school, and everything else goes on. I was on a course yesterday, and there was one of the delegates talking about when kids go back to school, and he said he's got the 8th of March now scribed into the brick on his house, so his children can go back, because everybody has had to be adaptable in the last 12 months, but some people haven't liked it, and that's because they probably weren't that adaptable in the first place. So in order to be more adaptable, it's okay to have a whinge and a moan, but then we need to go and do something with it, find a new way of doing things, adapt and move on, adapt and move forward, okay? Okay, number 5. Adaptable people talk to themselves. You guys know that I've talked about talking to ourselves for a long while. This is a slightly different look at it. When they feel their blood pressure is rising, their teeth coming together and their fist clenched, they flip the mental switch through self-talk. Engaging in positive self-talk is the single greatest habit you can learn for yourself. Now, you guys know that we've talked about self-talk a long time. I know some of you have gone out and bought the book, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. This in particular is about when you can feel the red mist rising. You feel the red mist rising, and you can put some triggers, some self-talk triggers into place. Now, for those that, again, have watched the sessions, you will know I talk about pathways in the brain. These are called dendrites. These are neurons. When you have a thought, electrochemical information goes down a pathway, and so on and so on and so on. And at the end of the pathway, you basically get your output, okay, or your behavior, okay? What adaptable people are very, very good at doing is, when something has riled them up, when the blood pressure's going up, they're getting stressed, and so on and so on. What they're very good at doing is having a word with themselves, putting some self-talk into a set of triggers so that they know what to say to themselves in those situations, and they avert, if this is the I'm getting mad pathway here, what they do is actually avert the chemical. They avert the chemical into let's get it done. Get it done pathway. Okay? So instead of going down the I'm stressed, I'm starting to lose it path, they're able to put a trigger in place, a self-talk trigger. And again, there's some stuff on the YouTube channels about this, because there's 3 different types of trigger. You've got specific triggers, generic triggers, and then ones around Gestalt as well that are in there. But they avert the chemical, they move the chemical down a different path, and they do it by having a word with themselves. Okay, so adaptable people talk to themselves in the right way when they need to have that conversation. Okay, number 6. Adaptable people don't blame. They don't blame a situation. They're not a victim to external influences because they're proactive. To adapt to something new, you must forego the old. Adaptable people don't hold grudges or skew blame needlessly, but instead absorb, understand, and move on. So it's again quite wordy, apologies for that, but adaptable people don't blame stuff for happening, okay? So, you know, again, you could use, you know, COVID as an example. We've been in COVID for a year now. I had a conversation with a client last week, and they are having to bring people together because the COVID excuse for things not being done on time, people are still using it. Now, in this particular business, they adapted. People had to work from home and so on, a lot like you guys, and people were given leeway. People were given leeway because obviously people were working in different ways. You couldn't see people face to face. People were learning new technologies and so on and so on and so on. But as my client rightly said, we've been doing that for a year. We've been doing that for a year now. So actually, who are the people that have adapted and moved on and are doing what we need them to do? Who are the people that are going, yeah, well, I can't do it properly because of COVID? That ship sailed a little bit now, hasn't it? I know there are still some things you can't do, like all go and be in a room together and so on and so on. Albeit, I think some of the guys up in Rotherham are kicking off some face-to-face training again soon. But it's kind of gone, hasn't it now? And you'll start to notice this. Listen to people. There are people out there now that have adapted. This is the way it's going to be. Do you know what? It's going to be many, many, many more months, if not to the rest of the year, until, and that's if the roadmap goes to plan, until we can start getting back to some kind of normal. But actually, some people have adapted. They're doing it the new way. They're just cracking on with it. They're just getting on with it. This is a new way of doing it. Some people are still blaming, well, I can't do it properly because I'm not in that situation. The problem is now, we've been doing that for a year, haven't we? So, again, adaptable people won't do that, but inflexible people will still go back to, well, we've got that excuse, it's been working for the last year, so it's still working now. But it's starting to run out, isn't it? And don't get me wrong, take this with a pinch of salt. I know there are some things that are still tremendously difficult because of the remoteness of what we're doing, but maybe there's one or two people that are banding about that excuse a little bit more now, and actually it's not about that excuse anymore. It's about making sure we're adaptable and we stay adaptable as an organisation. Yeah, quite interesting conversation I had with that client last week. Okay, number 7. Adaptable people don't claim fame. For anybody that is my age and below, you'll probably recognise that. The kids from Fame. If you're a lot younger than me, you might not know who they were, but that took me a little bit when I was looking for a picture for this slide. So they don't care about the limelight because they know it'll all soon burn out. Okay, so they don't do it for fame because actually fame doesn't last very long unless you do another thing. Okay. Rather than wasting effort on temporary issues, they shift their focus to the next obstacle to get ahead of the game, so that when everybody else finally jumps on board, they're already moved on to the next challenge. What a fantastic paragraph that is, guys. Yeah, they don't care about the limelight. They know it will soon burn out. They don't want to deal with temporary issues. They deal with those quickly and move on to the next big thing. So what's next? Let's look forward and keep moving forward. So you'll never find a truly adaptable person that's doing it all for fame. They're not doing it for that. They're doing it for deal with, to move on, to be ahead of the game. Okay. Number 8. Adaptable people know what they stand for. Okay. So this is something we touched on when we talked through the 3 sessions of resilience over the last few weeks. Okay. The choice to change isn't an easy one. Okay. It's always challenging, as we know. However, neither is the choice to remain the same. So, just before I move on any forward, there's a couple of things to think about here, okay? I've recently been doing some work on what are the drivers of change in an organisation, okay? And you've got all the normal stuff, market conditions, the pandemic, competition. You've got all the normal things for drivers for change in an organisation, okay? But there's one that a lot of people forget. And it is the status quo. And the reason they forget them is because it's a challenging one to actually make sure you're doing. And what I mean by that is if you haven't changed for a long period of time, that in itself gives you a reason to change. Okay? And it says here, however, neither is the choice to remain the same. So, 2 points that I want to make on this slide. First one is, I know there are people that will tell me if it's not broke, don't fix it. I understand that, okay? But if you wait till something's broke, it's too late to fix it. And there might be a better way. So one little tip to take away from today, adaptable people aren't happy with the status quo for very long. So if they've just done something, made a change, and now that change is playing out, that will be great, but only for a certain period of time, and then they'll be on to looking to renew it again. Now, some people kind of go, oh my God, they've done this, they've put it in, and now we're changing it again. Yes, but you might need to, because staying the same for a prolonged period of time isn't very useful. So that's the first thing that I want to focus on. Choosing to adapt to something new and forego the old requires a strong understanding of your personal values, knowing what's important to you and what isn't. That cajoles you along the path of adaptability. So what that is getting at is what you stand for, your vision, your values, the type of person you are. If you know that and you've done some work on it, it's easier to be adaptable around things, because you know what you stand for, and normally any external influences doesn't have to change who you are and what you stand for. Okay? External influences are external, they're not internal. Okay? So knowing who you are and what you stand for helps you be more adaptable, and people that are adaptable aren't very happy with the status quo after a certain period of time. They want to be able to move and adapt and move forward. So just bear that in mind, that sometimes we forget that in business. One of the biggest drivers for change in business could be that actually things have stayed the same for too long. Yeah, rather than potentially any of the other external drivers that we talked about. Okay. Number 9, adaptable people see systems. Okay, adaptable people see the entire forest rather than just a few trees. They have to, otherwise they would lack the repertoire and context from which to base their decisions on to adapt. So again, a little bit wordy, but what it's saying is adaptable people don't very rarely look at situations as a standalone. They will see it as a bigger system. They will see, if we do that, that will fix that, but what will happen to that, and then how will that work, and actually, is it that needs fixing, or is it these 3 steps here first? Okay, so adaptable people see systems. The great thing about systems is that you can learn all about systems. So you can go on courses to learn how to think systematically and see systems and things and patterns and stuff. Some people are more attuned naturally, I would give you that. Some people might be more attuned naturally. Now, there's an argument over the word natural. Is it nature or is it nurture? Yeah, so are you more attuned to see systems because of DNA? Or are you more attuned to see systems because maybe you were brought up that way? Or you went to school to be an engineer, for argument's sake, and you got used to flow systems and all this, so on and so on. Lots of different things in there. The great thing is you can grow it if needs be. Okay, so adaptable people see systems. Number 10 then, for adaptability, and then we're going to finish the session off with creativeness. Okay, so adaptable people stay current. If you want to adapt to change, you must know what to adapt to and why it's important. So earlier on we said about resourceful people having knowledge. Very, very important for adaptable people to also find all of that knowledge as well, so they know what to be able to adapt to. Or even if nobody can tell them what to adapt to, they can take up as much knowledge as possible and then extrapolate the best place to adapt to afterwards. Communication is at the heart of everything we do, and adaptable people realize the impact of their words, tone, and body language have on others. Adaptable people realize the impact their words, tone, and body language have on others, which is why they plug and play according to personalities involved. So this one links in to the work that we've done around personality profiling and emotional intelligence. Adaptable people stay current, but not just with news, not just with external news. They stay current with how people work and constantly grow their emotional intelligence. Okay, so this goes all the way back to what type of my personality am I? I'm a high red. If I'm dealing with a high blue, how can I adapt my profile to get the best out of them? And it's all about growing emotional intelligence. By the way, the one before, number 8, know what you stand for, is also about emotional intelligence. If you know what you stand for and you know what your values are, you've done a bit of soul searching. Yeah, you've started to learn more about you as a person. So that's about emotional intelligence as well. Okay? So, number 10, adaptable people can stay current, but remember, not just with news, they stay current with how people work, and they constantly grow their own emotional intelligence. Great! Okay, so to finish off the session then, to take us up to the end of the session, the creative self. Personality, characteristics, and creative potential times 10 different things that I've given you. So remember, by the end of the session, you've had 6 things around resourcefulness characteristics, 10 ways or 10 things that adaptable people do, and we're going to finish off with 10 things that creative people do, or 10 things that you can do in order for you to be more creative. So, number 1, imagination. Imagination is central to both the creative personality and creative process. Creativity often involves fraternizing, daydreaming, and other imaginative forays. There you go. Imaginary also plays a key role in creative thinking and conceptualizing. I reckon there are some people on this call that probably got told off for daydreaming when you were at school, and so on and so on. That kind of thing is encouraged more. Obviously, it needs to be in an appropriate time. Daydreaming when you're in the middle of a lesson, maybe, and somebody's trying to teach you something, maybe you need to focus on the lesson, okay? But daydreaming is actually quite a useful thing. It's something that I encourage my 2 youngest daughters to do all the time. You know, I caught my daughter daydreaming the other day, and she was actually talking out loud in this daydream she was having. And I didn't quite get what she was doing to start with. And I went, "You're right, Delilah." And she went, "Oh yeah, did you hear what I was saying?" So she was obviously daydreaming and didn't realise that she was talking. And I said, "Were you daydreaming?" She went, "Yeah." And I went, "That's not a bad thing, darling. That's not a bad thing." I said, "You daydream as much as you want." And that's when she went, "Yeah, but the teacher tells me off for it." Okay, so maybe when you're in the lesson you need to concentrate. But when you're not, you can do as much daydreaming as you want, because we know that it starts to use the imagination part of the brain. Okay, so conceptualizing, daydreaming, fraternizing with ideas, if you like, in your head. And I have covered something on these sessions before called a mind storm. If anybody wants to Google that or check out the YouTube channel, I think it's on there, on the YouTube channel on one of the sessions. Mind storming, brainstorming, sometimes it's called mind mapping, anything like that. Really, really useful. The key thing is this though. Remember, the pathways in your brain are like any other muscle that you've got on your body. When you use them, they grow. When you disuse them, they shrink. So, if creative thinking is something you don't do regularly, then you might want to start practicing it. Yeah, and you can start practicing it by learning a mind storm, learning a mind map. Yeah, looking at the next thing at work you've got coming up, looking at that next personal project that you want to get going, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, with that. So practice it, makes perfect, of course, using your imagination. It's like any other muscle in the body. You use it, it grows. You disuse it, you lose it. Okay, good. Number 2. Daydreaming again. Sorry, I thought daydreaming was part of number 1. I've put it in there as number 2 as well. Creative individuals often thought to be zoning out or daydreaming, and indeed daydreaming seems to play a key role in the creative process, as I've already mentioned there. Okay. Persistence. This is quite a good one for creative people. Creative people are persistent. They don't give up. They keep finding different ways to do things. So creative thoughts will say just that, unless acted upon. Okay, so creative thoughts are great unless you act on them. So you guys might remember the solution focused process: thinking, emotions, actions, results. You've got to do all 4 of those things to make sure that you get the results if you want a permanent result change. Loads of people can think of stuff, but then if they don't take any action on it, it won't be done. Okay, for creativity to be realized, one must take the next step, and perhaps a leap of faith. So we know that belief comes into thinking as well, doesn't it? Confidence as well as action coming into that as well, okay? So, just recap that one. Creative thoughts are great only if you take some action on the ones you want to. Otherwise, they just stay creative in your brain. Thinking, emotions, actions, results. Okay, got to be done in that order. Remember, electrochemical. Thinking, emotions, electrochemical, in that order. The thought releases the chemical into the system for you to be able to take some action and get some results on the back of it. The more they do it, the more you do it, the bigger, the quicker, the faster the results will be driven. And the bigger the new habit or habitual thing will be created. Number 4, high energy. Okay, gone too quick. High energy. High energy often comes with creative pursuits. Okay, it can take a little bit of energy to be creative. It's actually quite tiring when you do it properly, being creative. So what we need to do is make sure that that creativity is also kind of having giving us more energy at the same time. A little bit like a kind of a rolling circle. So you start here, you spend some energy being creative, okay? But because of those thoughts that are coming out, they spur you on and you get some more energy. And then that leads you to more creative thoughts and that spurs you on, and so on and so on and so on. And that's how creativity can help with energy. But it's kind of a chicken and egg scenario. Creative people generally have high levels of energy to be creative. Sometimes people think being creative is sitting, on a training course and coming up with ideas or in a meeting. Well, that can be being creative, but it's actually quite tiring. If you've ever had to be creative all day, if you've been on a recent training course, for argument's sake, or sitting in and listening to me in one of these, if you do both of these, and we normally do 2 obviously a week, it's quite tiring to learn. It's quite tiring to use other parts of your brain that you wouldn't normally use, maybe when you're working, or at least it's exactly the same with creativeness. Okay, so if you are going to be more creative, you're using different parts of your brain. If you're going to be creative over a longer period of time, then it takes quite a lot of energy. This is why sometimes, if you go on a creative thinking course, for argument's sake, what they might teach you is to be creative for a very short burst of time, maybe like 5 minutes, 300 seconds. So you're creative for a very short period of time, then you just step back for a little bit, okay? And then you go back in and you're creative again. Because being creative is really quite intense. You have to be high energy, and it does use up a lot of energy as well, but you would hope the thoughts that are coming from your creativeness would then spur more energy, and you get this everlasting kind of loop of energy and creativeness going on if you do it properly. Okay? Good. Number 4. Number 5. Independence. Okay? Creativity requires doing things differently, and a willingness to both go against the crowd and to stand apart from the common ideas while standing for one's own personal inspiration. Being creative means going against something called groupthink. So you may have heard this before. I may have talked about it if I've ever seen you face to face. I don't think we've covered a session on it actually. But groupthink is where people go with the consensus because it's easiest, or we go with the consensus because we're not confident enough to stand out. So as a trainer, sometimes you get this in a course. So one person will say something, and then the rest of the course will start going down that line. Okay, and it's called groupthink, but it doesn't just happen in courses. It can happen in businesses. For instance, if the CEO says something, that might condition other people to start going down that line rather than going, hang on a minute, is that the right thing to do? Do we need to challenge that? Do we need to do this? And so on and so on. So you need quite a high level of independence to be able to do that, okay? Not a high level of authority. So this isn't about level of authority in an organization and who can challenge what. This is a level of personal independence to say maybe sometimes go against the crowd and bring your case to the front rather than just falling in line with the sheep, if that makes sense. You know, the more businesses grow in the modern age, the more independent people are needed to challenge, you know, to come up with those new ideas to push them forward. Some of the best ideas I ever had as a senior manager in corporate life were from people that, you know, were newer into the business or had a fresh pair of eyes or were doing the job every day and they've been there a long time and actually nobody'd ever listened to them. And but those sometimes people sometimes don't get heard unless they're independent and go, you know, 99% of people say we should do it this way and this one person says I don't think we should because of this. So it's not just about going against the grain for the sake of it. It's about going against the grain with a business case to go, I think we should be doing something different. Okay? So, creative people are independent. Number 6, creative people take risks. So this is one where it starts to worry people. This is what stops a lot of people from being creative in case they have to go outside their comfort zone, which will mean change, of course, won't it, at that point. An independent person is inherently one who takes risks. Large or small, creative brings with it at least a modicum of risk-taking, including intellectual, social, psychological, emotional, and yes, at times, physical risks. Think of the Wright brothers. Think of, for those that don't know the Wright brothers, I'm sure you do, the first people that actually made an aircraft that flew. Think of how many people told them they were crazy. How many people that said humans weren't made to fly. That's ridiculous. There's no way that you could take the weight of a human and put it in the air, and so on and so on. And they went through a considerable physical, social, intellectual, and psychological, and probably emotional risk in order to get that first plane off the floor, because there was a lot of people that would have said it wasn't possible at that point. Okay? So, risk takers. Creative people are. Number 7, curiosity. This comes back to the resourcefulness as well. I said I'd link these things together for you. Open-mindedness, there you go. That was the first thing in being resourceful, wasn't it? Yeah? Naturally leads to curiosity and questions. And the creative impulse inclines one towards exploration and investigation. How does this work? Why is it like that? How can we make this better? Okay, so what, why, how, who, when. Creative people are majorly curious, constantly asking questions and constantly getting new knowledge into their system. And remember as well, if they're resourceful at the same time, they're also sharing knowledge. Number 8, perception. So, creative individuals seem to have a heightened perception, enhanced experience, and aware of our 5 senses. Perhaps seeing, smelling, taste, touch, and hearing with greater sensitivity. Further heightening perception often brings with it certain key awareness of qualities and experiences that other people may not share. Often this is referred to as insight or intuition. And I don't know if anybody could see the picture here, but it's from the film Lucy. I don't know if anybody's seen the film Lucy, but it's about Scarlett Johansson's in it anyway, so that's always a good reason, but that's beside the point. She, long story short, gets the ability to increase the average brain power of 10% up to virtually 100%, and she uses all aspects of her brain, and of course her perception is, well, it goes into sci-fi to be honest, but when their brain's just getting a little bit more use, her perception is much more heightened for things. So, creative people are perceptive. They work on perception. They work on how to heighten their senses. Number 9. Creative people have a sense of humour. Okay? A sense of humour. Humour is associated with the ability to approach problems and life in a general, fresh, childlike way. Okay? If you've ever got a big problem, ask a kid. Ask a young person what to do, and they will give you a childlike, simple, straightforward version of how to fix these things. Yeah? Humour in the form of puns, satire, all that type of stuff, the imagination, topics with a twist, anything like that. You will generally find creative people also have a good sense of humour. Yeah, and we all have a different sense of humour, so good is qualitative, I understand that, but generally that's what you'll find. They're able to do that because their emotional intelligence is higher. If you've got higher levels of emotional intelligence, some of the what's perceived as the thickest comedians are actually very intelligent. If you see comedians, there's one on Mock the Week, he's got really funny hair, don't know what his name is, and he just does one-line puns, and you look at him and you just think, you know, they're not very clever, those puns, but actually they're really, really clever. And I saw him being interviewed, and he was such an intelligent person, and he's emotional intelligent aside because he knows how to make people laugh, and it's the same when you're creative, high level of emotional intelligence. And then finally, number 10, creative people have an attraction to complexity. Now this is a double-edged sword sometimes. It's a good thing, which I'll tell you in a moment, but it can also be a little bit of a downside because creative people sometimes like to overcomplicate things and don't always see the simple route because of that. Creativity is not a simple concept or process. Often, creative enterprise brings discipline, styles, material, techniques, culture, geography, time periods. There's lots of things that come together with creative. Creative people tend to be drawn to complexity and may at times strike to make that switch to simple more complex. Okay, so that's just what I've said. Creative people are attracted to complexity, but sometimes that's a double-edged sword, and they struggle to make things simple then for other people, to put it into a simple format. Okay, so you just have to bear that one. Okay, so that, as they say, is it. There's a little thing if you want to actually use it. This stands for move. It's a great way to take all of the information for today. The M stands for move. So move into the exploration phase of change and become more creative, adaptable, and resourceful. Seek out new opportunities or create your own. Venture into those new improvements and take actions. And then energize yourself, because creative people have high energy. And if you can do all of those things, you can take some of that creativeness, resourcefulness, and adaptability, and you can achieve whatever you want in your life, career, whatever it may be.